Hey everyone, this is David Razavi, and in this video I'll be going over the cue I composed for the Westworld scoring competition. If you haven't seen the full video of my submission, there's a link to it down in the description below for you to check out, and let's just get right into it. So this whole piece is in the key of D minor. There's violins and violas playing an ostinato. It's a musical phrase or rhythm that's repeated throughout a composition. And this is a common 4/4 syncopated rhythm. Some people call it a tresillo or the 3-side of a clave rhythm. And it's playing on D with some added notes for dissonance. And there's low brass and string stabs accented with percussion, along with brass and string crescendos to build tension and set the mood of the scene. There's also a percussive synth sound that's in there to emphasize the rhythm of the violas. And we'll call this next part the A section. The strings are still playing that ostinato. While the low brass is playing a chord progression. It's going D minor, A major, D minor to A7. That crescendos up and down with the chords for dynamic range. Playing with dynamics like this had more effect on the scene rather than blasting all the way through, and it helps to enhance the musicality and doesn't fatigue the listener. The low drum ensemble takes a break in the first part, and more pitched drums take over to bring the intensity of the intro down a little bit and leave room to build it up again. As the car speeds away and the chase really begins, those big drums come in along with the snare. For this B section, the strings are still playing that same rhythm, but now with the notes D, F, C sharp, which adds a little more melodic movement rather than just staying on that static D. And the low brass are laying the foundation of the chord harmony on top of that. There's a solo flute that slowly moves, going from D to E to F and back down again. It's a simple leitmotif that will be coming back later on. And the woodwinds are supporting with staccato notes as well. And then I build into a little break where it focuses on Caleb. And this is Caleb's perception of the hallucinogen that causes him to experience different film genres. After this short break, that B section comes back, and for the sake of musical form analysis, I'll call it B prime. The string ostinato continues, but with a more prominent drum and percussion rhythm. And trombone and violins come in to add more intensity as the enemies are closing in. To add more tension, there's a long melodic line. It's pretty much ascending the scale with the brass and strings. And when it cuts to the overhead view, I bring it down again with an interlude. Everything drops out except for the string ostinato with violins and low woodwinds holding a D note. There's a brass crescendo that leads into the next section. In this C section, there's a variation of the ostinato, with the accent changing every 3/8 notes and one accented note at the very end. It kind of makes it feel a bit off and unstable, which is how Caleb is feeling at this point. There's a low string and brass part that holds a note for 2 measures as it slowly crescendos up to a short note, and that's using the same chord progression from the A section. The intent was to give this part of the scene an ominous undertone since it all ramps up after this. Dolores busting open the glass panel is a point that I wanted to hit. One thing you might notice is that there's a new ostinato in the strings using spiccato violin samples, but it no longer has that syncopated feel. It's in 4 and emphasized by the quarter note staccato in the cello. This part is accented with low drums and snare. There's a variation on that flute leitmotif from earlier in the violin and flute parts. It's that long D-F-E melody to counter the faster rhythm going on. Another point to hit was when they turn around to avoid the oncoming police ahead. And for that part, I wanted to use some extended techniques in the instruments, so I used a string glissando and low brass chaos effects for a brief break. That leitmotif comes back again in the horns and clarinet, and it repeats once with a higher harmony in the horn part. I added a snare drum part along with the low drum hits to add that higher frequency to the rhythm. I noticed that the sound of the bullets in the source audio track drowned out the low drums because the frequencies are too similar. So now that higher pitched snare isn't competing for that sonic space and can keep that driving rhythm going. And this is something to look out for when you're scoring to picture. Don't just make sure that you're not overpowering the dialogue. Sound effects are often overlooked, and both are usually prioritized over the music score in the final mix. There's a part where the rocket that Caleb fires misses the car, and all that's playing here is violins with flautando and harmonics articulations. These are softer sounding bowed techniques. The camera then cuts to the rocket as it starts to turn around and home in on the cars. And when those fins pop open and it makes that descent, I wanted the music to cut out completely so you only hear the sound effects from the source audio. Sometimes silence can be as effective as music to emphasize a hit point. Now when it cuts to the point of view of the rocket, there's low brass and string stabs to accent the impending doom of the target, with a fast violin part adding to the gravity of the situation. In the middle of that is all these dissonant string glissando samples that help impact the scene even more. After the explosion, there's a return to the C section as a sort of transition from the shootout going back to the car chase. The ostinato from that section returns, but the focus is more on the drums at this point, with a back and forth thing going on between the low drum hits and the higher pitched Olympic mini drums. You're hearing parts from different sections mixed together, and that creates more cohesion between the little motifs that were played separately before, but now they're blended. You get that ominous low brass and strings from the previous C section mixed with the horns harmonizing the chord progression with crescendos and decrescendos from the A section. And right after this is a return to the B section along with the rising melody and the high strings. In the second half of this phrase, the leitmotif that began at the B section and then went to the D section found its way back to help build this final climax. In these last 40 seconds or so leading up to the end, I found ways to rework previous sections to build up to the finale. This ending part is supported by the rhythmic stabs in the low brass and strings, with trumpets playing chords in the higher register and the trombones doing the same with their lower notes. After the motorcycle crashes, I make a callback to the intro of this piece. The scene ends with a close-up on Caleb's face looking like he can't believe what just happened, and I drive that point home with quarter note triplets and then the final note. And I had the basses play that part with Bartok pizzicato, which adds that percussive sound to these low notes and to blend in with the drum hits. The very end of the clip starts with a drum roll into the Westworld logo. The strings and brass are just holding a D note, but on top of that, there's trumpets holding the suspended sixths of the chord, which is a B flat, and then resolves to an A. And all of that just fades out. And that's what I created for the Westworld scoring competition. I just want to say thanks to Spitfire Audio and HBO for putting this all together. It was really fun to practice scoring to picture, and as a big fan of the show, it was so cool to see how a scene would work with my music added to it. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications, and let me know what you think in the comments below. And that's going to be it for now, so I'll see you next time.